Recently, I reported that some Northerners are pushing for the adoption of parliamentary system of government in the country. They argue that the presidential system of government did not resonate with our history, that the parliamentary system of government will profit Nigerians more. Now the discussion on between parliamentary system of government and presidential system of government, which of the two systems of government will bring Nigerians the full dividends of effective governance that we saw in here. The discussion is currently on, and I want you to listen to different views from different personalities on how they view the potentiality of parliamentary system of government and the presidential system of government, which we are currently experiencing at the moment.
Democracy is not working in Nigeria, right? And I think that's the entry point. And that's the point that I think we need to come out as elite and see how can we make it work, and how can we reinvent our politics so that the politics can actually serve the people. The consequences are very clear. If you do not have a system that is serving the people are eventually going to be squeezed, and they will revolt, and there will be conflict, there will not be development, and the whole society will be going down the drain. So if people offer their views in this respect, it is not because there is any particular interest. I don't discount the fact that there may be people who might have their own personal agenda, but even if there are, I think the overriding, if you like, the overriding motive and the overriding issue here is how can we make our politics better? And there are lots of other ideas, you know, that were put there, a lot of them corroborating the fact that we have not quite really operated a proper functioning democratic system. And like I also said yesterday, just look at what we have had in the last 25 years since we returned. Look at just 3 sectors that are very key. Look at the issue of economy. I mean, poverty has nearly tripled since, which means that we are getting poorer and poorer since the last 25 years. If you look at insecurity, insecurity has been escalating to levels that were inconceivable. And it has gotten to the point where it's affecting our food security, it's affecting our economy, it's affecting our social, cultural, activities. So it's literally paralyzing the society. Then you look at the mind-boggling corruption, the decay of institutions, the lack of the necessary infrastructure for a country like Nigeria in the 21st century. We have been, somebody mentioned it, we have been like working with nearly 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts of electricity for 25 years, for 250 million people. And this is crippling. Why is it that in a democracy, with all the resources that we have, with all the opportunities, that we have not been able to do that? So the point is, we have a crisis in our hand. You might say that the crisis in Nigeria is essentially a crisis of democracy, and we need to fix that. And in fixing that, I personally was quite impressed by the innovations of these, group of largely younger, politicians, by, putting that in the context of a homegrown solution. Mm-hmm. I think we should walk away from importing and copying others. We have a history, we have a culture, we have a civilization. If you go back into history, we actually taught Europe so many things. This is not to say if Europe has something that's good and that's working, we cannot adopt it to our own circumstances. But it's to say that also we as a people, we have our own thinking, we have our own ability to think, and we have our own society, we have our cultures, we have our belief systems. And we need to, tailor our political system, our economic system, our legal system to those beliefs, to those socio-cultural features of our own society. Otherwise, we're going to have a disharmony, between the system itself and the socio-cultural environment. And when you have that, you have problems of lack of trust, you have problems I mean, a number of them that we're having at the moment.
You know, I like that you talked about some of the socio-cultural issues, and I hope you could expand on that. The reason is the practice around the world, democratic practices around the world, are sort of copied. So many would say parliamentary system is not new around the world. Plus Nigeria has practiced parliamentary system, of course. So if you could explain in details what a homegrown parliamentary system would mean in the Nigerian context, considering our peculiarities, I think that would go a long way to sort of explain.
Very good, a very good opportunity for us to. Books have been written. I know we don't read, especially politicians don't read books. But in 1999, there was a book on governance. It was actually a PhD thesis by one of our scholars. He's late now. And he emphasized the issues of, values in leadership. And that is what actually defines a society, right? We have our values. And these values, if you want these values to be reflected in your own system, then it has to be homegrown, because that gives you the opportunity to, infuse or include those values as the basis of your own system. We have, for example, a pecking order, a kind of hierarchy, a respect for people in society based on certain values. And those values that are very good values that have kept our society for centuries, going and growing, they have no place in the new system because we borrowed it, and this system comes with the values of their own society. And if you look at the West today, for example, I know we don't have sufficient time to talk on this, so I'm skipping.
No, please go ahead. We'll have time.
If you look at the West today, the family system in the West has actually been literally destroyed. Because, I mean, you walk on the streets in London or in Leicester or in Birmingham or in Manhattan, in New York or in Washington, and you sometimes cannot differentiate, the gender of a person as they come across and pass you. They have all been transformed. And today there is a growing, in fact, aggressive LGBT policy that are even trying to impose in Africa. Now, this is the consequences of copying. If we continue to copy, we are now going to bring those things into our own system. And I don't think we like that. And many African heads of state have turned down offers of grants that were tied down to this. I mean, Ghana, I think, was one of them. Uganda was another one. And there are a few others around. So when we talk about homegrown, we are looking at a system that can blend with our socio-cultural environment, because people will make more sense of that, and people will be able to respect it better and accommodate it, and it will serve our interests better. Okay. I make two quick examples. For example, if you come to electing a leader in our traditional society, whether Christian or Muslim or even animists, when you come to, there are certain values, and one of them is that leader must be prepared to sacrifice. He makes sacrifices for the betterment of his own community. There are values of honesty. There are values of hard work. You earn whatever you have. When people find you with money that you have not earned, society will actually, try to avoid you. Now, that's kind of qualities of leadership, right? Allow me to land on this.
Okay.
I'm talking to you about, in our society, there are values that go along to define the criteria for leadership, right?
Absolutely.
Today, in our democracy, there is no criteria for leadership. We have a criteria for eligibility. That's what you find in the Constitution. And there is a difference between eligibility and suitability. The fact that you are eligible does not make you suitable, right? So when you come to actually select from those who are eligible, there is no criteria to measure. In our local society, there is. If you look at the northern traditional system, that is what they call kingmakers. In every polity, in every kingdom, there are kingmakers. Go and sit down with those kingmakers. They will tell you that they have a criteria, which they always, So here we are without any criteria. And what that means is that we have people who are literally charged, even though they have not been convicted, for huge crimes of stealing public wealth. And they still scale through. And sometimes they rise to the topmost position of leadership. And they continue to steal. And this is why this democracy is not working. This is why there is no trust. This is why people really cannot even relate themselves to these things.
So in the end, it would be nice to know how the parliamentary system can resolve this. But let me go to Honorable Kingsley Chinda. We had lost you for a bit there, but let me come to you now. Honorable Dr. Bugaje was just talking about trying to explain the idea behind homegrown system. And I had initially asked you about your takeaway from the event from yesterday. But then beyond that, you know, I had asked him also about the reason why Nigeria is preferring a homegrown system. But as you answered that, I think it's also important for us to look at why we left the parliamentary system in the first place and chose the presidential system. So maybe that would help to understand where we're going. As they say, if you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going to.
Thank you, and I'm sorry for that glitch. And let me start by appreciating Doctor for the wonderful lecture and insight that he gave to us yesterday. The whole issue about a homegrown parliamentary system of government, I will start by saying that perhaps it is for lack of a better word from the diction that we have called it parliamentary, because some persons are quarreling with the word parliamentary, but the entire spirit, essence, purpose, and gamut of what we are out for is that we should have a homegrown system that will consider our peculiar circumstance and our background, our attitude, culture, tradition, and all that in coming up with laws. If we go back to history, even the colonial era, when the British took over this part of the world, they did not implement a single system across board. They had a direct and indirect rule. And what was the reason for that? Because they studied the background of the people and felt that in this area, direct rule is better. In the other area, indirect rule will serve their purpose. These are some of the things that we have not done in importing laws. Either we import them hook, line, and sinker, or we import them and tinker them to suit an individual, not the society as a whole. Everybody is complaining today that, look, corruption is at its peak, public office holders are not doing what they ought to do. And some people also argue that it's not about the system, that it is the operators of the system, and that there is need for a mindset change and all that. I agree. There are problems with the operators of the system. But then what do we do to correct those problems? Are you talking about mindset change for persons like myself, who already know what is wrong and what is right, and you want to begin to talk about sensitization for mindset change without punitive measures where I default? Do you think that it will work? And the answer is no. We have looked at our laws as parliamentarians, and the presidential system that we operate today is too bogus for a country that intends to grow. The essence of a presidential system is for speedy development. Are we getting speedy development 25 years after? There is no light, there is no water, there is no area that we have done well 25 years after. And you still want us to continue to operate that system. I don't think it will work. Yes, people are very shy when it comes to fundamental changes. But the truth is that if we want to make progress, we should be ready to make sacrifices. We should be ready to adopt some of these changes. So in essence, the whole idea is that you need to come up with a system which is, to us, closer to a parliamentary system, where you have the head of government accountable to the people. And then we also looked at the cost of governance that we all cry over. It is cheaper to implement a parliamentary system of...
Okay, I think we may have lost him there again. I think the argument, Dr. Bugaje, on how we came to the conclusion that parliamentary system of government, of all the other forms of government, would be best for us would be really advanced here. And many would want to ask this question. The argument is, well, that now democracy has failed Is it peculiar to us in Nigeria? Because I've heard as well that democracy is failing all over the world. And those places where democracy is failing, they're not considering other forms of government. They're looking towards how to improve this. In Nigeria, there are those who have advanced conversations to change the constitution as a way of fixing the country. So where do we draw the nexus here between trying to change the system entirely or changing the constitution, which many believe that would be the best way to go?
Okay, permit me to build on, because he was making a point when the glitch cut him off, I don't know, network problems maybe. I think he was talking about the cost of governance and the accountability of leaders. I'm sure he would want to go that direction. I think he's making a very important point. So I want to chip in here before I take on the question you have to ask me. One, if you are going to be the head of government, at the moment in the presidential system, you have to win elections in all the 36 states and the federal capital. And in your campaign, you have to go around all, the states. Imagine that huge amount of money that you require. In the parliamentary system, for you to be the head of government, you only need to win your tiny constituency and come to parliament. And once you come to parliament, it is your colleagues in the parliament that are going to elect you to become their prime minister. They represent the people they represent. So in a way, there is representation. Therefore, it's a lot cheaper for the kind of economy that we have found ourselves in. And he talked about accountability. In the parliamentary system, the head of government is always in parliament. He has to answer questions, he has to explain to his colleagues. But as you know, one of the parliamentarians, I think a senator, Senator Ndumi, did complain that he can't, or they can't get access to the president, and for which he was almost harassed, by his own colleagues. And I recall in Trump's first term, there was a Singaporean diplomat who characterized Trump's government as incestuous, self-preferential insularity, meaning you cannot reach him. During the time of Buhari, you cannot reach him. He was surrounded by the cabal, and so he cannot even be engaged. And this is the executive system we've been running. People stay in the villa for 8 years. You can't reach them. They do what they want. We have seen the consequences of that. But if it were a parliamentary system, you have to come to parliament. Every time the parliament convenes, you have to be there. Unless, of course, we have some other, and then you have to answer questions. You have to, engage your colleagues. And all these things are televised. And people do send questions through their representatives. So it's far more engaging, and it cuts, it sort of obviates the kind of situation we have, where people come into power and continue. Now, coming back to whether it's going to be a constitutional amendment or a change, in the system.
No constitution change or change in the system.
I think the two must go together, because the constitution will reflect how the system you want to run will be operated. It sort of guides you. It defines the powers of parliament. It defines the powers of the prime minister in a parliamentary system. It defines the powers, of every agency of government or every arm of government, so that these powers complement each other, and there will not be any either overlap or some kind of friction or contradiction that will, create this in the system. So I see the Constitution as a tool that guides the operation. So what is fundamental is what system are you going to run? And like I said, if we are making it homegrown, then we are going to infuse our values. For example, we would want people who are going to be selected as leaders at every level. And I'm not saying just the president, the governors, the councillors. Even if you're going to appoint a minister, there has to be some criteria which relates to what, expectations of a society of leadership, right? If you don't do that, very soon you're going to have a gay couple, as leaders. And I don't think I would like to see that. Because I think that's decadence of the type that we have never anticipated. Therefore, I think the change in the system, and you see, this is not somebody imposing any particular, it's a dialogue. What these honorable members have done is to actually ignite a dialogue on these. And we expect that there will be a number of sessions, people will be making submissions, but it's also a way of building an elite consensus as to what kind of system of government we want to run in our country.
Okay.
It is obvious that the executive presidency or our kind of democracy in total has not worked for us in the last 25 years, and this has to change.
Okay. Honorable Kingsley Chinda, just before your network interrupted, you were trying to explain the idea behind homegrown, and Dr. Bugaji has expanded that a bit, talked on some reasons why the cost of governance would be cut in this process. And I also asked him about one very important thing, which is democracies all over the world are struggling, but not every country like Nigeria is considering changing the system. So perhaps you could explain why Nigeria's system is changing and the nexus between the constitution change as canvassed by many and the change in the system as you are canvassing.
Well, very correctly, like Dr. rightly said, it's a constitutional change that has to do with change in the system. Also, for other countries, they would sit back and find out why democracy is failing in their countries and begin to look for solutions in line with the reasons for the failure. In our country today, the electoral system that brings us into public office appears to be faulty. Our attitude as public office holders appear to be faulty. Our constitution, which we are building on, also appears to give us too much latitude. And these are some of the things that we need to look at and begin to tackle. So we are looking at the constitutional issue. The constitution we operate today builds stronger individual and weaker institution by its very nature. And so we think that that is not good enough for us. The example that Doc also gave, you can be a president of Nigeria for 4 years and decide not to talk to Nigerians. It is not unlawful. There is no law which says that you must, except now that we are struggling to come up with a bill, a law that will compel the president to always come to Parliament to give us a State of the Nation address. Else, there is no law that compels you to do that. But in a parliamentary or the homegrown system that we are proposing, because we want the president to be accountable to the people, you must be in Parliament, you must talk to Nigerians through their parliamentarians, and then policies of government will be discussed and understood better. These are the reasons why the democracy in Nigeria is failing. And that is why we are going this way to correct them. We must not wait for other countries to take the lead and then begin to correct and we'll go back to copy. Let us correct it the Nigerian way and let other countries copy us.
All right, beautiful. I want you to speak a little more on the aspect that says that the parliamentary system of government will build stronger institutions than stronger individuals.
Firstly, if clearly everybody is elected, and then I gave the example of ministers. Ministers are appointed from amongst elected persons. You know that if you're elected, you owe your loyalty to those who elected you because you go back to them if you want to remain in office. You don't owe your loyalty completely to your appointer. That means that that institution is stronger and you, the individual, will be a little bit weaker. Unlike what we have today, that a minister is appointed, the minister is loyal to his appointer, a commissioner is loyal to his appointer, even the supervisor at the local government level. And so they will do exactly what the chairman or the governor or the president wants them to do, regardless of what Nigerians want, because he has a vision and a mission. That's what he will tell you. And then aside that, the institutions that we have, which is both the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive arms, if you also look at the latitude, there are a clear example which former Speaker Dogara gave yesterday, removal of public office holders, which is like a punishment for non-performance. It's almost impossible under the present constitution that we have. As a parliamentarian, if you want to recall me, it is a method. The method to recall me is one that is almost impossible to attain. You need to get about 50% of signatories of those who elected me. And then that 50% is 50% of the entire voters in my constituency, which has almost 600,000 voters. How are you going to get the 50%? Elections that we have held in the past, I'm not sure we have attained more than 200, 300,000 voters in all. And then you need that as 50% when we have had that as 100% of those who have come out to vote. It's almost an impossibility. And these signatures must be verified. So these are some of the things that we need to weaken and strengthen the system. In Nigeria today, we don't even break rules. We bend the rules because of the laws, go through and allow it to sit back. And so it does not help for proper accountability. It does not help for people to be afraid of institutions because you think that you can always get away with it being at that high position. How many people get worried if they're invited by the police today? They feel that it's an institution that they can compromise. The courts are the same. Talk less of the other smaller institutions. So we need to begin to have a system where there will be proper punishment and, you know, consequences for non-compliance, consequences for non-performance.
Okay, let me come to Dr. Bugaje now. Yesterday you talked about the need for a change in political culture and for us to create new political parties with ideologies. So I'm just going to, you know, dovetail from that and ask you, amid concerns with this parliamentary system of government, which many say could create dominance of a particular political party, that's the main party.
Well, when we speak of parties, the first thing to consider, what is the content? Today, if I ask you what defines APC, what defines PDP, what exactly is the difference between APC and PDP? You look at their manifestos, which is where the content of the party is supposed to be located, you find it is like written by the same person. There is hardly any difference. How is that different from SDP? How is that different from PDP, PRP? How is that different from all the other parties? So as far as I know, and I've held a party, as you know, in my at one time National Secretary of the ACN, then ACN. We tried during my tenure to see how we can actually build content, and we started. And I know I did quite a number of things, but time will not allow me to say them now. But the point is, our parties in Nigeria today, they have no content, they have no conscience, and they have no courage. If you see the kind of thing that parties do, I mean, for example, you take a party, you take a person who has been shown all over television, you know, putting dollars in his own pocket, and you make him, you know, the chairman of your party. What are you telling us? I mean, this is the face of corruption, literally. And then you have him there as your party chairman. And so these are the kind of things that basically kill democracy, because they rob it of that trust. I mean, this is a person I've known for such and such as, and now if he is the head of the party, then you are saying this person is defining the party, right? So definitely, if we want to run proper, sustainable political parties, we have to come back to content. You know, what is it that really put the people in that party together? I mean, if you look at other parties around the world, you can go to Singapore, you can go to Japan, you can go to Europe. Every party you take, you can go to the US, it has a particular way of looking at governance. It has certain values that defines it, that makes it different from the others. And this is why you find people who have lived all their lives in politics, but in one party. Very rarely do you have somebody switching from Republican to a Democrat. So in fact, some of them, their grandparents, their parents were all Republicans, and they remain Republicans because they believe in those values. They have been raised, you know, under those or by those values. Okay. And so there will be consistency, there will be conviction. At the moment, I don't think any member of any particular political party today in Nigeria has any courage of conviction that he can really come. And this is why it's easy for them to move from...
Is this not a problem? I ask this because since this conversation went public, calls for change to parliamentary system of government, the distrust between the political class in Nigeria became even louder. And Nigerians question why they should allow the leadership of the country to be bestowed in the hands, or the selection of the leadership to be bestowed in the hands of politicians that they don't trust, because parliamentarians will now choose one of their own to become president, and the people will say they would be left out of deciding who becomes the president of the country. So this distrust is a problem, isn't it, as we look towards the system of government? Okay,
you are right in raising that, but you have to also appreciate the fact that, and this is my real entry point, when we come into this change into parliamentary, we are not just speaking about change into parliamentary. We are speaking about change, and this is why the homegrown is there. So we are going to address the leadership recruitment process itself, which at the moment is completely faulty. It has no criteria whatsoever. By the time you fix the leadership recruitment process, those people who are going to be in parliament are bound to be people that the people who elected them can trust. At the moment, you can't, because the system does not even allow you to, even if you want to do so. So the package is not just parliamentarian. Okay. You have to address the content of the party. You have to address the leadership
the process recruitment, the process of even selecting party leaders and elected officials as well.
And then you have to also take into consideration the fact that there will be values of the wider society that will be infused into that. System, so that the local fish woman selling fish in the market, you know, it can now relate to the system. At the moment, honestly, she's mesmerized.
let me go.
By the way we do this election,
she
doesn't even get into it. She doesn't understand. But if they were going to elect the chief in her own community,
she'll be directly involved.
No, you will see her agitated with a lot of passion, because she understands what is happening. But this is a European thing that we pick. Nobody really people understand it, and then
let me bring in Honorable Kingsley Chinda here to speak on this issue of trust, of the trust deficit. I know you followed the conversation.
Well, clearly, no doubt that issue of trust on public office holders is there, and the reason for that is because of our conduct. I keep saying, and I will say again, that for public office holders, we should endeavor to be role models, just like pastors or imams in society, and we have lost that, and that's why there's distrust. But further on this conversation, is it easier to trust the kings and your community that you know better? You know my character, you know my antecedents, than to trust Nnamdi Shehu, who is running for presidency, that you don't even know when it comes to presidential election. I think that what the new system, the homegrown system, will do is to throw up competent and capable people, because you now know that the member you are sending to the National Assembly could be the President Minister of Nigeria. And so you go with your best 11. You know that the councillor you're sending to the local government council should be somebody who has capacity to be chairman of that council. And so you will not go with a mediocre. A little bit of that blindfolding by either religion and all that will be watered down, because you want to send your best, because anything could happen at that stage. And then it is also true that amongst colleagues, assembly, we know ourselves better, and we know those that are more competent to handle offices much more than the electorates at home. And so if we are electing amongst ourselves somebody to be prime minister, there's a likelihood that we'll have a better quality representation than when you throw the person open to election in the entire country. I don't want to talk about the issues of cost and all that, but I think that this new homegrown system will build more trust and confidence in the people. More so when public office holders will have no option than to sit up, because if you don't, you will be thrown out easily.
All right, that's a good point. Now, let me ask you this. You mentioned, you touched on it a bit, but let me ask you. Nigeria is very diverse. Just about every policy of government or every action of government is considered on various fronts: tribe, religion, ethnicity, region. So let me ask you, what will be the place of region, tribe, religion in a parliamentary system as you're proposing?
Clearly, these issues were considered strongly, and we felt that the best way to diffuse these issues of tribe, religion, and all that, it's also this system where you elect your members and allow the members to, amongst themselves, get the prime minister and the ministers. And these persons will also be accountable to Parliament. You will also agree that once you have ministers in office that are from Parliament, the likelihood of tribalism will be reduced, because you are accountable to your colleagues in Parliament that are from all other parts of this country. And so if you are recruiting, I use that as an example, you are recruiting or employing in your ministry, and you decide to employ people from your part of the country only, by the time you come back to Parliament, your seat will be at stake, because your colleagues from the other parts of the country will not tolerate that. They will not agree to that. But today, if it happens, what do? You summon the minister to committees, some would not even attend.
So, Honorable King, with specific focus on the president or the prime minister, as the case may be, would there be considerations as to where he is from, what religion he is, and as we see now?
I think that, yes, the prime minister must come from a particular area. When it comes to voting, of course, I will not claim that issues extraneous will not determine, because political party will determine. Some who want to vote for those who are from their part of the country could do so. But our interest is that once you are in office, those issues of tribalism will not be tolerated as much as it is tolerated under the present system, because you stand the risk of being blessed with a vote of no confidence, and then you will lose your seat.
All right, fair enough. Dr. Bugaji, that is a problem on its own, isn't it? The fact that
I don't think it's a problem.
Just a second. The fact that the prime minister can be removed at any time. The argument with those who say there is a disadvantage to parliamentary system of government is that an unstable government could occur if Parliament loses confidence in the president. He could be, in the prime minister, he could be removed at any point in time.
But look at the other side of it. It simply means that the prime minister is going to be kept on his toes all the time. If he wants to stay on that seat, he has to work. If he can't, he goes. Another person steps in. Government continues. So it's a far more efficient system. Not a system where you, for 4 years, you can't see your president, you can't reach him, you can't access him. So when he gives away 15 trillion of your money into a road that we never heard about until the contract was issued, you cannot even reach him to say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? We don't agree with that. And he's now gone. That money has gone. And 15 trillion is actually what you require to buy the 30 million metric tons deficit of grains that we have in this country today.
So, you know, one of the things that Honorable Kingsley Chinda talked about yesterday, and I think he also talked about it today, is that Nigerians behave a certain way when they go outside the country. When they come back, they behave differently. And that's a mindset change that needs to happen. The argument for many who wonder what the point is in changing the system of government is, how will a parliamentary system of government affect the mentality of Nigerians?
Now, I keep coming back to this very important point. Don't think of only the parliament. It's a package. Think of the party which is going to change, which will have context and which will have content, which will have conviction, you know, which will have some level of ethical consideration. Look at also the leadership recruitment process. That's also going to have certain criteria. So by the time you apply these two and perhaps more, you're going to have entirely a different set of people. And this consideration for religion and tribe is usually magnified when there is no competence. It is lack of competence that magnifies this. This issue of these considerations, they only thrive when competence is not there. If you want to fly to Lagos, maybe your office in Lagos, you know, needs you for some work, right? Are you going to bother yourself about which tribe or which religion is the pilot? All you want to know is that this is a certified pilot who can take you to Lagos safely, right? By the time we get competent people who are able to deliver on electricity, who are able to deliver on security, who are able to deliver on food security, who are able to deliver on the most essential things of governance, I want to tell you these, you know, differences will ultimately dissolve.
Okay, Honorable King Sachinja, let me come to you on the issue of leadership at other levels aside the president now, and how the parliamentary system will address it. Because regardless of whatever jargons we speak today, Nigerians want to know what sort of development will, you know, occur at the lowest level, because only recently we started considering stronger amendments to the local governments following the Supreme Court ruling. So talk to us about the impact of this at that level, and checking the excesses of the other leaders at that level, at other levels beyond, apart from the president, the prime minister.
Well, thank you. In fact, the bill we proposed has three legs. The first is at the local government level, and truly what we are looking at is that this practice should start at the local government level. And it is that when we start at the local government level, we'll be able to look to begin to identify the problems and hiccups that will come along the line, and then begin to make consequential amendments. When it is done at the local government level, we then move on to the state level, where it will also be practiced, consequential amendments will be made, inputs will be made, and then when we succeed at that, we'll come up to the national level, which is the last lap of it. So the bill proposed has amendments at local government, state, and the national level. And like we have said, this system, if implemented, will strengthen the structures right from political party. Of course, we lack completely political party ideologies, because we feel that right now you can easily move from one party to the other. But if you have this system in place, you know that you must believe in the ideology of your political parties. And even political parties themselves will sit up, because the tax is no longer a tea party. It's not a serious business that you're going into. And so it will impact from the grassroots. And like I said earlier, if you are electing a councillor, you must go with your first 11, because that councillor could be the chairman of the local government council. And so that room for mediocrity will be drastically reduced. I wouldn't want to say it will be erased. We are not also saying that this is a magic wand. It will have its own problems, but it is definitely better than what we are practicing today.
Okay, I would like you to speak on the aspect of resource sharing. Honorable, I wanted, you've spoken about the political aspect of things, but I want you to speak on the aspect of resource sharing, which is a major problem with the presidential system that we operate now. Can you hear me? So, okay, let me come to Dr. Bugaje. I think the service providers have acted again. The political aspect of things is one side. Resource sharing is another. And the reason why this is a conversation is because this is a process that must be touched on by the subnationals, and they must sign off on it as well. And everyone would want to know how resources would be shared in a parliamentary system of government.
I really don't see a problem with that. Resource sharing throughout the world in every government is guided by a formula. And this formula is revisited after every period of time that they agree, because the whole structure, is dynamic. So, for example, you may have discovered new resources, so more funds are available, or certain things have happened, the prices of something has gone down, I mean, let's say crude oil or whatever. So what I mean is, it's always guided by a formula, and that formula is, based on certain principles. There are principles of development, principles of population, principles of this and that, whatever. And it's debated openly with everybody's representative on the table. So it's not like somebody going somewhere and crafting something for his own people alone. No, it can't happen in a proper democracy. So therefore, whether it's parliamentary or whether it's executive presidency, all these things are guided by a formula. First, the formula is the issue of debate. How much percentage are we going to give population? How much percentage are we going to give development? How do we address those with specific problems of, gully erosion or desert encroachment? How much percentage are we going to give for those societies that are there? What are we going to do with this? So I really don't see a problem. If you have properly constituted a parliament and you have people who are knowledgeable, there are good practices around the world that they can pick and to be guided. Okay. They agree on the principles, they come up with a formula, and this is the easiest thing really to get that. Both resource sharing and power sharing are very easy to make because you have formula. What is actually the problem is religion and tribe, which you cannot share. And that's where you need a kind of, you need that trust to build into it, and then you have mechanisms to check if somebody is trying to go outside the rules.
Recently the regional development commissions that were established were done so that resource sharing could be sort of evenly matched and development in all the regions can be balanced. So let me go to Honorable Kingsley Chinda on this issue. In proposing this bill, I don't know if you've taken into consideration concerns around sharing formula in the country, because there are some regions that don't think that they are getting what they deserve. So when we talk about the concerns around the federal government taking too much, have you taken into consideration the revenue sharing formula?
Well, firstly, for the proposed bill, the revenue sharing formula, it's not part of it because we believe that that is still part in the system and has an agreed methodology as we speak. But when the parliamentarians see the bill takes up and there is need to change that revenue sharing formula, we can assure you that with the quality of persons that will be thrown up and then the level of dispassionate decisions that will be taken, I don't think that there will be a problem with that, because all we are talking about is to begin to build a proper nation for ourselves. And then if we believe in Nigeria, resource sharing will not be a problem. It's a problem today because we still believe in our region and our tribe. So everybody will want to go back home with something for his own region or his own tribe. But if we all believe that Nigeria is our country, I think that that will not be a major issue. Yes, it is today, and we're seeing bills coming up for establishment of regional development commissions, and then the change of Ministry of Niger Delta to Regional Development Ministry. That is a step to solve the problems in the interim. But we are looking at the bigger picture, the political problem. And of course, you know that once you have the right solution politically, economic and others will be the decision of the politicians. And I believe that the proper decisions will be made.
So let me just take just before I take a final statement, since you mentioned the position of political players here, Dr. Bugaji had initially talked about the concerns around political parties and the processes of electing representatives. So perhaps you want to explain, if you could, how we could improve representation and improve political parties' processes such that the quality of the politicians that will be produced in this country could be dependable and perhaps bridge the gap, the trust deficit gap.
Clearly, like I had said earlier, for the parliamentary system, if you are sending anybody out, you know the consequences when you send a mediocre. you know that you're also shooting yourself on the foot. And then for those who are going to the higher office, the executive office, they will be choosing amongst their peers, which means besides the fact that they belong to the ruling party, they are going to be the best among their peers, not just anybody for grounds of political patronage, no. And then for political parties, clearly, you now begin to have political ideologies because you are sending people from the parliament that are going to implement your policies and your programs. And if you fail the people represented by parliamentarians, there is a likelihood that you'll be kicked out. And there's no political party that will want her prime minister to be changed very often. It points a finger to the fact that something is wrong with that system. You must be prepared that you are likely to lose your majority at the next elections. So it has several effects on the system. But finally, I would say that the major issue that we are looking at in this is that for every default, there must be consequences. Public office holders should not be allowed to be sleeping in their offices. If you are not competent, you don't need to bring yourself out for service.
Okay.
Public service should be for competent and capable people only. And this system will ensure that.
Okay, thank you. I think you already said finally, so I assume that's your final statement. So let me get Dr. Bugaji. I want to ask you what you think the role of traditional and religious leaders would be in this process. Perhaps you could speak to those who are still skeptical about this system and explain, speak to their conscience on why this system should be adopted.
Well, let me first make a statement. I think we are winding up, so we don't have much time. But you see, if you really take a closer look at our society, a lot of the burden of society is today being held by the traditional rulers, the pastors and the reverends, and the imams. When you get to the village setting, there is no government. All the problems of society is basically shouldered by these people. And at the moment, they are completely outside government. So I think any constitution must recognize the role they are playing and try to factor that in and give them the necessary support to continue the good work they are doing. So that's one point, and that point has been made severally, and I think it's part of what they are considering in the amendments of the Constitution. But you see, when you speak about the system of government, beyond the recognizing or the recognition of the different elements in society that are functioning, you need to look also at the world that we are going to operate in. And this conversation is not easy for people whose level of understanding is very much limited. And sometimes we operate like we are the only country in the world. We are a small dot, so we have to look at the wider society. And I always want us to remember that our population is growing, and the role we are going to play in the world is going to be growing with our population. Because big population is a big market.
Thank you. That's a very good point. That's a good place to leave it. I'm sadly we're out of time.
But I need to make one very quick point, that the parliamentary system with all its advantages will not be beneficial if you don't fix the party and you don't fix the leadership requirement.
Absolutely. Well, there are advantages and disadvantages to everything, and parliamentary system of government is not left. I'd like to say very...
Many has continued to argue that the parliamentary system of government was the system of government that the colonial masters expected us to run with. But we abandoned the parliamentary system of government which our colonial masters expected us to run with and adopted the US presidential system of government, which according to many is not going well with the country.